Kamala Harris, ladies and gentlemen, sat down with the snitch Al Sharpton. That's right. And I think you'll be interested in some of this discussion. There's one part in particular I am definitely pretty pumped to highlight. This form of misogyny that is continuing to be spread throughout corporate media. I think we really need to dive into this. It's really starting to tick me off quite a bit. And I don't know why they're trying to put all this pressure, particularly on Black male voters, to support this woman. Like I just don't get it. So let's go ahead and get into this particular interview here. Ladies and gentlemen, Al Sharpton, the Fed, and Kamala Harris. Here we go.
Good evening and welcome to Politics Nation. Tonight's lead, in her own words. I'm coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia tonight, where just a couple of hours ago I sat down with Vice President Kamala Harris. We spoke about the historic nature of her race as she is now facing as an extraordinary historic campaign with just 16 days to go until the election. In just 3 months, that election will take place. Vice President Harris has managed to introduce herself to the American people and pull into a dead heat in the polls. Now she's seeking to draw contrast.
I think he meant to say 3 weeks.
And mobilize her supporters in the final days of the race, including African-American voters. Meantime, her opponent, former President Trump, is ending with an increasingly hostile and erratic closing message. And that's where we start. Here is my exclusive interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. Well, thank you for allowing us on your birthday to sit down and talk.
Of course, Raph, it's good to be
And
with you.
I want to get to the Georgia vote and other issues, but let me ask you, as Vice President, and if you hopefully not presented with it, but as President, with Sinwar having been killed, how would you move toward a ceasefire? What do you think the United States should be doing?
So one thing I want to say here, notice she already starting to sweat. Did you notice that she rubbed her forehead there? So I was surprised that Al Sharpton started with Israel as the first question. I'd not expect him to choose that to be the first, the way to start off this conversation, to be honest with you. So I was kind of shocked about that. People usually kind of push the foreign policy a little bit towards the middle or the end. But did you notice that she did that? Like she got a little nervous there.
So first of all, look, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, but we have got to get this war over with. We got to get the hostages out. We need the war to end. In fact, we're sending Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, out next week to go and meet with the parties there. And the death of Sinwar, I believe, has removed an obstacle.
Pause. Anthony Blinken, I told you guys that they sent him there, right? So they sent the guy who was busted, and we found out about it because of leaked documents, busted for knowingly, knowing that Israel was going to withhold aid to Gaza. And that's who they sent to make the deal. Why do they continue sending Anthony Blinken there? Because Anthony Blinken is okay with Israel, because Anthony Blinken is really not going to get anything done. Everybody understand this? Anytime you sit there and you nod your head and you're like, okay, whatever, they tell you they're not going to let aid in and you just go along with that and you lie to everybody else during the press conference to make it seem like I had no idea. Oh, we're going to have to investigate that. We've heard stories about that. Yeah, that means you're a piece of shit person. And if I saw those leaked documents, I'm pretty sure Kamala Harris saw those leaked documents too. So again, why would you send Anthony Blinken back over there? Anthony Blinken should be fired.
to that end. And so we've got to work at it, and we've got to work at it through diplomatic means, and that's what we intend to do. But listen, the reality of it is that the difficulty of it all is not new to any administration in recent history. And it cannot be the reason that we don't work at it around the clock and be vigilant. And that's what we're going to do. And I think it's very important that that's what we do.
And balance. I mean, I remember in Selma, you made very strong statements about civilians being killed on both sides.
So notice how she said, and we're going to go back just a second. Did you guys hear what she just said? Once again, we're working around the clock. So again, another lie. Let's get back to this both sides thing, because I want to address something.
Work at it around the clock and be vigilant. And that's what we're going to do. And I think it's very important that that's what we do.
And balance. I mean, I remember in Selma, you made very strong statements about civilians being killed on both sides. And you stood up strongly on that.
On both sides. Does that sound familiar to you? Doesn't that kind of remind you during Trump's presidency and during the Charlottesville protests? Remember when Donald Trump made that statement? He said there's good people on both sides, and he got a lot of heat from the media about that and stuff like that. So you had like the Nazis on, neo-Nazis, whatever, on one side, and then you had like people protesting against that on the other side, right? Now you have Israel, a racist apartheid state on one side, and then you have occupied, oppressed people on the other side. So this is the point I want to bring home. Why isn't Kamala Harris receiving that same type of criticism about both sides that Donald Trump received? And some people may hear this and they say, well, Sabby, Israel was just, no. Israel is a racist apartheid state. So when Kamala just said to Al Sharpton, he's saying that she said there were good people, there's civilians on both sides. How is that any different than when Donald Trump said there were good people on both sides in Charlottesville? You got one side of racists and you got the other side of people who are anti-racist. In the situation with Israel, though, you have a side of racists and you have a side of people who are occupied by those races. These are just things I catch.
And I think that's a concern in all communities.
Well, I mean, listen, the number of innocent Palestinians that have been killed in Gaza, it's really unconscionable. And we have to be honest about that. And at the same time, listen, I will always stand in terms of Israel's right to defend itself. And
there are a number of people, too many civilians in Gaza that have been killed. And look at the look on her face. You can tell she is very uncomfortable with this topic. And now she goes on to say, but I'm still going to defend Israel. And you know she's lying. Like, just look at the expression on her face. Can't you see that this in particular, this topic, she looks worn down, right? Doesn't she look like this topic has been wearing her down? Listen to this.
In terms of Israel's right to defend itself, and we need this war to end.
See? It's always her referring back to her notes, because I don't look. Kamala Harris does not have a plan. She doesn't have a plan for this at all. What's happening in the Middle East? She don't have no plan. That's why she keeps saying the same script over and over. I'm going to defend Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself. I'm going to continue to support Israel. It's the same statement over and over because she has no plan. Matter of fact, I'm willing to bet someone on her campaign team, probably on the foreign policy side, her foreign policy advisor, they probably wrote that for her. She has no idea. She doesn't have a plan. She don't know what to do. And she took money from the Israeli lobby. So it's not like she can say Israel is committing a genocide. I just showed you the article where it says she won't even admit it's a genocide. Woo, honey.
We're in about a little over 2 weeks to the election.
Yes.
I have to ask you about your opponent. He used a very ugly term about you last night, using the S word as vice president. And how do you react to this kind of street talk from someone who wants to be president again, that was president? I've known you a long time, and I know you have thick skin, but I'm not asking you as a person, because I know you're used to that. But what does it do, in your opinion, to the standards we're setting for our young people all over the country when we're using this kind of locker room street talk about an opponent for president of the United States?
So here's a mistake that the Democratic Party is making again that they made in 2016. Number one, Al Sharpton just let you know that he's known her for a long time. So yeah, he's not going to be soft in this interview with her, right? Seriously. So there's that. But here's the mistake. In 2016, the Democratic Party decided to focus on Trump's rhetoric about Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump won anyway. I'm noticing they're doing it again. They're focusing on Trump's rhetoric about Kamala Harris. And what I think the Democratic Party has not figured out is that the reality is, when people have the economy as their number one issue, they don't really care what a candidate said or called another candidate another name. They don't care. They just know that the grocery prices are high and they want someone to fix it. They just know that the cost of housing is too high and they want someone to fix it. That's what they know. That's what they're paying attention to. So they're doing it again. He called her a name. He said this about her. Listen to the rhetoric that's coming out of his mouth of referring to this woman this way. They did that in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and it didn't matter. Hillary Clinton still lost. Kamala Harris' biggest mistake is not running as a change candidate. Right now, with everything that is happening, people need a change candidate. The only candidate that I see right now in the race that has the ability to probably make it to that 5% is Jill Stein. She is the change candidate. She has the ability to bring the Green Party to the 5%. She's pro-Palestinian. She's correct on the Gaza issue. She has a platform that rivals Kamala Harris's platform. It's better than Kamala's platform. And she's beating Kamala Harris with the Muslim voters in the swing states. So it just, to me, there could have never been a more opportune time for someone to come through in the Democratic Party as a change candidate. And that is not Kamala Harris. And I think people thought that was going to be her. And then they realized, oh shit, she sounds just like Biden. Big mistake.
So the American people deserve so much better. That's how I come at it. And to your point, the President of the United States must set a standard, not only for our nation, but understanding the standard that we as a nation must set for the world. You know, we as representing the United States of America walk into rooms around the world with the earned and self-appointed authority to talk about the importance of democracy, rule of law, and have been thought of as a role model, imperfect though we may be, but a role model of what it means to be committed to certain standards, including international rules and norms, but also standards of decorum. And what you see in my opponent, a former president of the United States, really is, it demeans the office. And I have said, and I'm very clear about this, Donald Trump should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. He has not earned.
Let's talk about demeaning the presidency, right? Because it's not just Donald Trump, right? Like, I don't agree with a lot of the things that Donald Trump did under his presidency, but let's not pretend like he's the only president that's done some things that can demean the office of the presidency. We can go all the way back to JFK. That's how far back I can go that I know of, right? Because doesn't it demean the office of the presidency for the president to be having affairs with all these different women, particularly famous women that people are going to see them out in public with? Isn't that demeaning? Wasn't it demeaning for Bill Clinton to have an ongoing affair with his intern? with a White House intern in the White House? Wasn't that demeaning? But yet Bill Clinton is allowed to still make public appearances and give speeches for the Democratic Party and their candidates. Bill Clinton was right up there on the stage at the Democratic National Convention. I thought he demeaned the office of the presidency, but because he's a Democrat, he's allowed to just walk right on that stage and come right in. Hell, they even let his ass walk on the stage, but they wouldn't let a Palestinian American speak. Think about that for a second. So if you're going to call it out on both sides. Don't act like Donald Trump is the only one, because he's not. That's my problem.
Earned the right. He's not earned the right. And that's why he's going to lose.
I remember 1972. I was 17, going on 18. I worked as youth director for Shirley Chisholm's campaign for president. And I was stunned that some of the backlash she got were from black elected male officials saying they didn't want to support a woman. They went with other candidates. I think it was George McGovern.
Pause. Because I'm going to say something that he is not mentioning about Shirley Chisholm's race, okay? And the George McGovern thing. It wasn't just black men or politicians that wanted to go with George McGovern. It was white men too. But of course, Al Sharpton doesn't want to mention that. These are the things that people need to hear. I can't. So watch what he does here.
And I hear these people talk about black men that are pulling away from your campaign, though I've not seen any real evidence of that. Do you think some of the resistance of some men, black and white, is misogynist? And are you proud to see that most Americans, even being polled, have no problem supporting a woman at all? And I'm one that lived from Shirley to Kamala in terms of these campaigns.
And it's
so let me ask a question. Al Sharpton says, how do you feel about black men that have been pulling away from your campaign, even though I've seen no sign of that? If you've seen no sign of it, why are you asking about it? I don't know. You guys tell me, if you've seen no sign of it, why are you asking about it? Nobody owes Kamala their vote. Nobody owes Trump their vote. Like, politicians have to earn their votes. So when they say, well, black men are pulling away from you, remember this same framing was used around Stacey Abrams. Remember when Stacey Abrams was running for governor? The second time around, the corporate media pundits, they said that Stacey Abrams is losing black male voters. If she loses, it's going to be their fault. But after that race, when I pulled up the data showed that it was actually white women who didn't come out and support Stacey Abrams, and that black men supported her very much so. I believe that percentage was like 88 or 89%. They came out and supported Stacey Abrams. They're ready for someone to be a fall guy. I just want to warn everybody about this. They're waiting for the fall guy. And that fall guy, if Kamala Harris loses, that fall guy is either going to be Jill Stein and or Cornel West, right? They're going to blame third parties. They're going to blame one of them, or black men. Even though the numbers will most likely show you that that is not the case. Even though the numbers will most likely show you that black men will overwhelmingly support Kamala Harris more than any other male group. But they're going to try to find a way to blame. I'm telling you, write it down, guys. If Kamala Harris loses this presidential election, they're going to blame one or two people or both. They're going to blame Jill Stein, third parties, and black men. I'm waiting for it. And I'm waiting to pull the data.
I have an emotional reaction to you raising the point of Shirley Chisholm, because it is on her broad shoulders that I stand, and so many of us stand. And we have come a long way, to your point, and on your specific point about including the fact that I have the support of countless Black men who are in elected positions, including I'm just this afternoon and 2 church visits today with the mayor of Atlanta. That being said, I think that you are absolutely right, that there is this narrative about what kind of support we are receiving from Black men that is just not panning out in reality in terms of when I go to last night Atlanta and had, I think, 10,000 people at a rally. I will also say this, Rev.
Pause. Kamala, the polls show right now, that you are not where your predecessors were with Black voters, period. Not just Black male voters, Black voters, period. You're also behind with Latino voters. Right now, there was a poll that came out earlier today that shows that Trump is ahead with Latino voters over Kamala Harris. And I wonder why. I'm pretty sure if you guys think about it, you can probably guess why that is. So, interesting things, ladies and gentlemen.
I am very clear. I must earn the vote of everyone, regardless of their race or gender. And what can be frustrating sometimes is to have journalists ask me this question as though one should assume that I would just be able to take for granted the vote of Black men. I think that's actually an uninformed perspective.
Are you going to tell that to Barack Obama? Because Barack Obama is one of those people. Barack Obama is one of those people that has been criticized by a lot of us for going to Black men and saying to them, it's because of you brothers. So are you going to tell this to Barack Obama? Of course not, because that's your buddy. That's your pal.
Because why would Black men be any different than any other demographic of voter? They expect that you earn their vote. And that is why I am talking and presenting my policies in a way that are, of course, for all Americans, but I will also speak about the specific impact that I can see it having on different demographics of voters.
While we're talking about Black men, and let's talk about Blacks in general, because one of the things, I've been on a nonpartisan tour at National Action Network and Central Park 5 and others. And one of the things that reporters ask, and we don't get it from the audience, is what about the Kamala the cop? And I said, well, I knew her as DA.
Right.
You and I go with that. She was one that wanted people with marijuana arrests not to go to jail.
Exactly.
And Attorney General.
Everybody hear this? Listen to this.
General wasn't even under your purview. I mean, do you think that this is orchestrated, that they're trying to find some way to separate you from some elements? Because you used to be attacked for being too progressive as a district attorney.
I know.
Pause. So let's go ahead and debunk some lies here, okay? So first of all, this is not the first time someone has brought up Kamala Harris' record as a prosecutor. This has been mentioned multiple times. Remember when she ran in 2020 and Tulsi Gabbard gave her the knockout on the stage about her particular record? Okay, so he brings up the marijuana situation. Well, you actually didn't want those people to be locked up. Okay, that is not what the streets are saying. And in particular, all you have to do is a quick YouTube search, quick Google search, and you'll find people that were affected by Kamala Harris's prosecutor, skills during that time. You'll find people that went to prison that were wrongfully imprisoned under Kamala Harris's reign. You'll find people that were arrested because of truancy under Kamala Harris's reign. So even so much to the point, and you can Google this as well, that you will see there was a CNN investigation recently into Kamala Harris's history as a prosecutor, where they sat down with multiple families, no Black families, but check this out. On that video, no Black families. I thought that was interesting. But they sat down with multiple families that were directly affected by Kamala Harris's truancy law. And that essentially was a school to prison pipeline system, because when you arrest those parents because their kids miss too many days of school, you have now taken the parent out of the home. So if you're a single parent and you were taken out of the home, what happens to the child? The child belongs to the state, and then they are put in the system to the state, where they're put into a foster home, where a lot of times at these foster homes, those foster parents are just collecting the check. That's the only reason that a lot of them will do it. And they treat those kids like trash. Or those kids are put in a group home, which is even more horrendous. So he want to bring up marijuana. Why don't you bring up the truancy law? It's crazy, guys.
But here's the thing, Rev. We are, as of today, Sunday, 16 days away from the election for President of the United States. And there are all sorts of people who are going to throw a bunch of things out that will include mis and disinformation with the intention to dissuade certain people from voting.
If it was mis and disinformation, why didn't you prove it was mis and disinformation on the debate stage when Tulsi Gabbard told everyone about your record? Why didn't you prove that? When Tulsi Gabbard knocked your ass out on the debate stage, why didn't you prove that it was misinformation or disinformation? And pay attention to something, folks. I believe this woman is going to be very hawkish on censorship. I believe it. Notice how Biden and Kamala continue to say misinformation, disinformation. You're hearing that more from the Democrats than you are from the Republicans. This is something you got to scratch your head about for quite some time, because it makes me wonder, what are they going to do when it comes to censorship? If Kamala Harris becomes president, I can see her cracking down on that. I can see her cracking down heavily more on social media and telling them what they can and cannot allow on their platform. And I can see her cracking down on YouTube and stuff like this too. You should not trust this woman. You should not.
And that's not new. And so that is why I'm spending time in all communities to make sure that they hear directly from me, so they can judge for themselves in a way that is unfiltered. And I'm going to continue doing that. I am leaving nothing on the field in this election, leaving nothing on the field. So I sit with you this afternoon after visiting 2 churches today, this Sunday morning. Yesterday I was in Michigan. Tomorrow I'll be in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And I'm leaving nothing on the field.
The black vote is important, but Georgia's important.
Yes.
Wisconsin's important.
Yes.
And how do you, as you go, dealing with your economic message? Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people that call my radio show that says, well, what happens? How does this impact my pocket?
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean, Reverend Al, with inflation reduction. I don't know what infrastructure means. Right. Share with our viewers on what has impacted them and what a President Harris will do that understands what needs to go in their pocket, not the Beltway language. Mm-hmm.
So it's a very legitimate and important question the voters asked that we should respond to on the affirmative without waiting for the question. So, for example, how will it affect individuals? Part of my plan is to expand the child tax credit to $6,000, and in particular to target young parents in the first year of their child's life to make sure they have the resources to buy a crib or a car seat or clothes, because, you know, we know that the vast majority of our parents have a natural desire to parent their children well, but not always the resources.
So I just want to reiterate here, because I don't want people to be misled or to be confused. This means you have to have a child. It doesn't apply to the children you already have. You have to have a child. So it's almost like they're trying to find a way to reward people for having a child. I don't know. But the tax credit thing, all these tax credits all over the place, tax credits. That's what a lot of this is. Just tax credits. So just keep that in mind. You have to actually have a child.
Especially when you also recognize that we did this, which is expand the child tax credit for less than I'm proposing now. But when we did, we reduced childhood poverty in America by 50%, black childhood poverty reduced by half. Part of my plan is to deal with the home health care of seniors. And I tell a personal story. I often go off script to tell a personal story. When my mother was sick, as it turned out, she was dying from cancer, I took care of her. And And to take care of an elder relative means to try and cook something they feel like eating or can eat. It means trying to put clothes on them or give them clothes that don't irritate their skin, to help them put on a sweater. It means trying to figure out a way to just bring a smile to their face from time to time, to say something that might make them laugh. It's about dignity. And far too many people who are taking care of elder relatives are struggling, because to do that means often they may have to leave their job, which means they're going to reduce their income, or they have to pay down their savings to qualify for Medicaid. So my plan is to recognize this is about dignity and to say that should not have to happen in order for you to have help to take care of an elder. We're going to have Medicare cover it. And I think about this issue also in the context of people who are in the sandwich generation. And that's what we call people who are taking care of their young kids and their parents.
Wow.
And shouldn't have to think about leaving their job or losing all of their savings in order to apply for Medicaid. These are examples. I talk about what I intend to build, which is an opportunity economy.
Let me pause here for a second. Let me ask you guys a question. She's right about being a caretaker. It is a very taxing job. And a lot of times caretakers are also working a full-time job as well. But given that you had that experience, particularly with your mother, then you should be in support and you should advocate for universal health care in this country. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, why is it that the healthcare initiatives on the platform seem to primarily apply towards seniors? And I've said this before, when they talk about the insulin, we got insulin down like $35 for seniors who are on Medicare, not for anybody else. So it just seems like to me, when it comes to healthcare, that's something that everybody should have. Why these limitations? Just like with the child tax credit, like the child tax credit, like what's with the tax credit? You know what I mean? Like, you can give billions to Israel and Ukraine, but when it comes to us, let's give you a tax credit. I just can't. Like, I can't, man.
Which in large part understands the vast majority of Americans have ambition, aspirations, they have an incredible work ethic, they have dreams, but not necessarily access to the resources that allow them the opportunity to achieve their goals. Unlike my opponent, who thinks about the world differently, I think informed in large part by the way he experienced life, having been served $400 million on a virtual silver platter, which he then filed bankruptcy 6 times. My opponent, who, when he thinks about tax policy, it's about cutting taxes for the richest among us, billionaires and the biggest corporations, who can afford, by the way, to pay their fair share. His plan for what I call a Trump sales tax would be at least a 20% tax on everyday necessities, which economists have estimated the average American will pay $4,000 more a year.
The economists have said things about your policy too. See, that's the thing. Economists have called out Trump's economic plan and Kamala Harris's economic plan. I would like to sit down with a different economist to have them go through a list of what they want to do as well. But when she talks about how Donald Trump grew up, is true. Like, he didn't have to work for it. Like, it was given to him. That is true. And he is a billionaire. But Kamala Harris has no problem taking money from those billionaires. Don't forget, Donald Trump's family donated to Kamala Harris's campaign when she was running for AG in California. See, she leaves these things out. You were totally fine with Trump back then when he was donating money to your campaign. And remember back in the day, some of you might remember this. Remember back in the day, a lot of the rappers were like really cool with Donald Trump. Some of them still are. But back then, I remember Donald Trump made appearances on like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like, he would make appearances in different like music videos and stuff like that. You guys were cool with Trump back then. In fact, you weren't criticizing the way that he grew up and the money that was handed to him. But let's talk about it, though, because the reality is, too, as much as Kamala Harris says she grew up in a middle class family, she started off way ahead of a lot of us, because her parents, her mother was from a caste system in India that was better off than a lot of us, where she had the money to come here and attend college, enter a PhD program, the father in a PhD program. They were professors at elite academic institutions. So don't get it twisted. Like, I understand her parents did divorce, and I get that. Not easy, probably being, a single parent. But even with her mom being a single parent, and it was her and her sister, Kamala Harris was already a step ahead of a lot of us that came from working class families. And I think that's what she does not understand. My parents didn't have PhDs. My parents don't have a college degree. My parents, weren't professors at these schools. Like, my dad joined the military, and that was his way out of poverty. But even then, in the beginning stages, my parents didn't have a lot of money. As time went by and things, they did better, but it was the military that allowed us to have housing that my parents didn't have to pay for. So there's that as well. But this storyline that Kamala Harris leans in with, where she says, I grew up middle class, I'm just like you. No, you're not. That's the thing. And I'm a millennial, and she's ahead of me generation wise. And a lot of people I know, particularly in my circle, we didn't grow up that way. We didn't really have it like that. That's why we have student loans. That's why we still have student loan debt. Okay. So yeah. And that's something that Kamala needs to be a little bit more honest about that, I think. Stop saying you grew up middle class, you grew up like us. There's hardly any middle class in this country anymore. So you are speaking to the generation of people, we don't know what you're talking about. Let's continue.
So when asked this question about how will this affect my life in terms of a voter worrying about the fact that, look, price of groceries still too high. I get it, they get it. And what are we doing to help them actually get through life in a way that they're not just getting by, but getting ahead? We have to have specific policies that do that. And that is what I offer under what I call an opportunity economy approach. But Donald Trump is offering something very different, including what he's talking about in Project 2025. And I'll tell you, from the biggest rallies I do to church services, people know what's in Project 2025. Right. They know that it would allow corporations to basically stop protecting the right of workers to have overtime pay. What it would do to take away the independence of the Department of Justice. And as we know, he intends to use it to attack his political enemies. People are very concerned by what Project 2025 would do, which is to get rid of public servants who have dedicated their lives to doing public service, and instead putting loyalists in these various agencies so that he can have them bend to his will.
So because Kamala Harris is a weak candidate in an empty suit, she diverts to talking about Project 2025, which I told you guys before. Project 2025 is not good, but it's not something that the Heritage Foundation hasn't been talking about doing for years. There was a Project 2020. There's a project such and such. It's not a new thing. And the fact that the Democratic Party has been able to convince so many people that this is brand new, it's hilarious to me. Now let's talk about this point about the DOJ, the Department of Justice. The same DOJ that prosecuted Black socialists and accused them of being Russian agents, that DOJ, the same DOJ that goes after people that speak out against empire, that Department of Justice. And see, that's another thing, is I'm not too cool with Merrick Garland. I'm not too cool with the Department of Justice. I'm not too cool with these mofos. They like to target, instead of targeting the right, these companies that they really should be spending more of their time going after, they like to go after everyday people who may be protesters, activists, organizers, and accuse anybody who seems to have some type of experience in Russia or some type of connection they had to Russia or whatever as being a Russian asset and a Russian agent. So I'm not too keen on the DOJ. I'm not. It's just what it, I'm not keen on the FBI. Both of those departments, both of those agencies can go fuck themselves. That's how I feel. So I don't really feel like that's a big selling point. And then two, you started talking about the groceries, but you didn't say what you were going to do. You keep saying, well, they're going to have to take those prices down. How are you going to do that? Because, and the reason why I'm asking that question, this is one of the policies that economists, even those who support Kamala over Trump, have said is going to cause a big problem. They have pointed back to when Richard Nixon did this, and they said that it caused inflation. So that's a real concern. So when I say, like, you should be focusing on what you are going to do and how you are going to be better and why people should support you, instead of going back to what was given to Donald Trump, and which everybody already knows this, that didn't turn people away from him before. Just keep that in mind. I didn't see one person turn away from Donald Trump because of what was given to him. People started turning away from him because of some of the things that he said during his presidency, because of the Muslim ban, and because of January 6th. Those are the things that made people turn away from him. But the whole money thing, I didn't hear people complaining about that. She should be focused on what she plans to do. And because she is a weak candidate, and I cannot say this enough, she has nothing else to do but to focus on how bad he is. He's bad. He's dangerous. He's this, he's that. And the Democratic Party did this in 2020 with Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't really have that many plans. He just said, I'm running on saving the country, healing the soul of America. We got to get that guy out of here. Heal the soul. And how did that work out? And you see what happened to the economy. You see what happened to foreign policy, because people were just like, we don't really need plans or platforms. We just want someone that can beat Donald Trump. And that's how you got Joe Biden. And that's how we ended up with the war with Russia and Ukraine. That's how we ended up with this war in the Middle East. That's how we ended up with the genocide. And you can see what is happening right in front of you right now. Now you have the grocery store prices that are extremely high. And that's been a problem over the past year. This is what happens when you vote for a candidate in an empty suit. They don't have no plan. Some of these things Kamala Harris pointed out that is a part of her platform, she don't even tell you how she's going to do it. And that's what people should be asking her in these interviews. That's why you'll never see her come on here. That's why you'll never see her do an interview with someone that's going to press her on the policies.
Instead of do the work that is in the public trust.
Last question. Yes. I'll go back to where we started with Shirley Chisholm. Mm-hmm. Today's your birthday.
Yes.
And we all reflect on our birthdays, what our life would mean. You called me on my birthday. Thanks again. Mm-hmm. What do you want 50 years from now, history to say about Kamala Harris?
I hope that and I really do work that my life will have proven to have been a life that is about fighting for the people, fighting for the dignity of people, work that has impact in a way that uplifts the people, all people. I do hope that's what history will say.
No. History is going to say some other things. It's going to talk about what you have done. Yes, as a prosecutor, it's going to talk about some of these statements that you've made to Palestinian people, to Arab American voters. I am speaking right now. I'm speaking right now. It's just, I think that act that we saw from Kamala Harris, that behavior that we saw from her at that rally when she said, but right now I am speaking, that I think that's who Kamala Harris really is. And I think that's part of the reason why Kamala Harris has had such a difficult time keeping staff. That what slipped out there in the crowd when she said, I am speaking, I think that's who she really is. And I think that's what you're going to get as president. What does the poll say? Let's check out that poll. Yeah. Do you believe Kamala will stop arms to Israel? We have 2,559 votes. 2% of you said yes. 93% said no. 3% said there's a slim chance. And 2% said, I'm honestly not sure. Well, Kamala, I don't know how to tell you this, but you in danger, girl. You are in danger.